Here is something most people will never admit out loud. The man who texts back in 2 days gets remembered longer than the man who texts back in 2 minutes. The one who doesn't compliment her gets analyzed more than the one who compliments her every day. And the man who simply doesn't chase often ends up living rent-free in her mind for months. If you've ever wondered why this happens, why effort sometimes pushes people away instead of pulling them closer, you're about to understand something most people go their entire lives never noticing about themselves. This isn't about games. This isn't about playing hard to get. This is about something much older than dating, something wired into the way the human brain decides what matters. Picture this. A woman meets 2 men in the same month. The first one is warm, attentive, consistent. He texts good morning. He plans the dates. He tells her clearly and often that he likes her. The second one is harder to read. He's friendly, but unpredictable. Sometimes he replies fast. Sometimes he disappears for a day. He's interested, but never quite fully there. Logically, she should prefer the first man. He's safe. He's reliable. He's doing everything right. But somehow, it's the second man she keeps thinking about. She replays his messages. She wonders what he meant by that one short reply. She finds herself checking her phone a little more often than she'd like to admit. What most people miss here is that this isn't about which man is better. It's about which man her brain has classified as unfinished. And the brain, it turns out, has a strange relationship with things that are unfinished. There's a phenomenon psychologists call the Zeigarnik Effect, named after a researcher who noticed something odd. People remember interrupted or incomplete tasks far better than completed ones. A waiter could recall a long, complicated order in perfect detail, right up until the bill was paid. The moment it was closed, it vanished from memory. The mind doesn't let go of open loops. It keeps circling back, trying to resolve them. Now apply that to a person. A man who is fully available, fully predictable, fully understood, becomes a closed loop. There's no mystery left to resolve. The brain files him away as known and moves on to scanning for the next unanswered question. But a man who is warm one day and distant the next, he never gets filed away. He stays open, active, unresolved. And the mind, without permission, keeps working on him in the background. That's the first layer. But it's not the full picture, because if uncertainty alone created obsession, everyone would be obsessing over every confusing person they meet. That's not what happens. So there has to be something else underneath this. This is where it gets revealing. The brain doesn't just register uncertainty, it registers reward. And the most powerful kind of reward isn't a constant one. It's an unpredictable one. This is called a variable reward pattern, and it's the same mechanism behind why people check their phones compulsively, why slot machines are more addictive than vending machines, why a maybe pulls harder than a yes or a no. When a reward comes every single time, like attention, affection, validation, the brain adapts. It stops releasing as much dopamine because the outcome is no longer in question. There's nothing to anticipate. But when a reward is inconsistent, when affection shows up sometimes and not other times, the brain starts producing more dopamine, not less. Not because the affection feels better, because the anticipation does. She isn't addicted to him. She's addicted to not knowing what's coming next. And this is exactly why the man who chases consistently, who gives clear, constant affection, can start to feel almost too simple. Not because consistency is unattractive, because to a nervous system wired for anticipation, consistency stops generating a chemical response. That's the second layer. But there's a third one underneath it, and it's the one most people never want to look at, because it's a little uncomfortable. This pattern hits some women far harder than others, and the difference usually isn't about the man at all. It's about how she learned to receive love in the first place. People who grew up with affection that felt consistent and safe tend to interpret consistency as comfort. To them, a partner who shows up reliably feels like peace. But people who grew up with affection that felt conditional, where love had to be earned, where attention came and went, where they learned early that closeness could disappear without warning, often interpret consistency very differently. To them, consistency doesn't always feel like peace. Sometimes it feels suspicious, almost too easy. Their nervous system was trained on a different rhythm, one of effort and withdrawal, closeness and distance, warmth and silence. So when they meet someone who mirrors that familiar rhythm, even though it causes anxiety, it also feels like home. Not because it's healthy, because it's familiar. And the brain consistently confuses familiar with right. This is the part that changes everything once you see it. The obsession was never really about him. It was about an old emotional pattern looking for its next chapter, and finding a man whose unpredictability happened to fit the shape of it perfectly. But here's where most people get it wrong. They assume the solution is finding someone even more emotionally unavailable, chasing the high over and over, mistaking intensity for connection. The truth runs in the opposite direction. The goal was never to crave uncertainty forever. It was to notice when craving uncertainty is actually an old wound speaking a new language. Real attraction, the kind that lasts past the first few months, doesn't need to keep you guessing to keep you interested. It doesn't run on anxiety. It runs on safety that still manages to stay alive, curiosity that comes from genuinely knowing someone more deeply over time, not from never knowing them at all. The irony is, the calm, consistent man wasn't boring. He was simply offering a kind of love that some people were never taught how to recognize as enough. And the moment you understand that, you start watching your own patterns differently. You start asking, when I feel pulled towards someone, is this real chemistry? Or is this just my nervous system replaying something old and calling it desire? Because here's the quiet truth underneath all of this. The mind doesn't always chase what's good for it. It chases what's familiar, what's unfinished, what keeps it guessing. And learning to tell the difference between longing and love might be one of the most important things a person can ever learn about themselves. Not just in who they're drawn to, but in who they finally choose to stay with.